that all the hard learning I'd done the first time round, I could utilise that in a different way. And luckily, again, my husband found an advert that was a little government kindergarten that was closing down. And so we went forward and proposed that we might open a little Montessori centre there too. And that's kind of how it went. Serendipity came my way. Things happened at centres. Things appeared in front of me, opportunities to take. So I never kind of had a vision. I didn't necessarily think, oh, one day I'm going to have 7 centres. And I certainly didn't, when the bank says, what's your business plan? I was like, well, what's a business plan? I didn't have any of that. I just knew that I wanted to give children a really great opportunity of having the very best fun and the very best time in their early years. And so because of that, when opportunity arose, I guess it just excited me. It really, I'm not artistic in any other way, but I guess the part of me that was just inspired is just that amazing opportunity of saying, yeah, I'll do it again. I'll try and, I think we can reach more children and more families. So, each time I went from there, I guess, we were just always, our reputation then grew, I suppose, and schools came to us and said, we want to start an early learning centre in our school. We don't know how to do that. We've heard that you've done this before. Can you do it with us? And so it's kind of just took off from there. So, that was my beginning. And as I said, my greatest journey, and during most of that time, at the time that I've been involved, I have been on the floor teaching as well. I love the children. I love the reward that you get from being with those children. And I guess it's only as I've got older and my knees didn't quite, want to do what I wanted them to do for getting up and down off the floor that I've stopped teaching. But it's just every single time has just fulfilled me and, given me a lot of joy to see something new starting and more children and more people learning about what Montessori can bring. So there's my story.
Did you have any background in business before you started?
Nothing. And that's been my hugest journey. I continue to be on that journey of learning because, as anyone who works in the early childhood profession would know, it is governed by regulation, compliance. It is huge. And as soon as you looking after somebody else's child, there are some incredibly strong things that you have to understand because of the safety around children. But also as a business person, you're suddenly responsible for all your employees and, their mental health these days. The whole role of what you're doing in an administrative sense has grown hugely and put an enormous amount of pressure on the people who are running centres now. So no, I didn't have training. I did a little bit of training along the way to try and fill me in. I have tapped into a whole lot of resources of professionals who can assist me. I ring up and find out from the lawyers if I need to do something to check that it's correct before I send it out. But I think it's just been. That's been my journey and it continues. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out what do we do next when the next lot of compliance comes in and the next thing changes and how do I look after my staff and the children. And I guess the other part of that, Mark, is that ultimately, no matter which way you look at it, when you have 7 centres, I have fabulous directors and staff, but if something happened to a child, I'm the one that has to defend it. And that's an enormous responsibility, particularly, when you actually privately operate, privately own businesses, very different situation to community or government. I'm actually it. So that, I carry a lot of responsibility for that. And for that, you have to trust a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think there's any conflict between private enterprise, profit-making enterprise, and education? Like, I know when I started my journey in Montessori 30 years ago, I had that view myself that we couldn't have for-profit Montessori because by its nature, you would undermine the value, that we were striving for in education in Montessori. And have you, as SA Montessori has grown, have you found that there to be a conflict between the need to make a profit and your ability to put the needs of children front and center?
Look, I think that was around even before I started, 40 years ago. It's always been an issue, certainly in South Australia, of, not-for-profit versus profit. Of course, what people are really saying is, even a not-for-profit has to make profit, or it wouldn't be a business. You can't have a centre or a school that doesn't make a profit. Ultimately, what it is what is done with that profit. And I feel very strongly, there are a lot of supposedly not-for-profit childcare centres in particular in Australia who have all sorts of things, government, government assistance and tax tax exemptions and things like that, who pay their CEOs and their executive directors enormous amounts of money. But it doesn't look like it's going to anybody privately. So there's still people making a lot of money in not-for-profit businesses. In my situation, I probably, if I'd ever had a business plan, if I ever really did think that I was going to make a lot of money and had a vision of that, I could have done things differently. But my journey has come from my heart. And so, in fact, I think I've probably put far more back in to the businesses that I could have. If I didn't have that vision, if I didn't actually believe in what I want my centres to look like, I could make more money. But that's not why I do it, and that's not the way it's been. And I think when I talk to people about profit versus not for-profit versus for profit, you think about any other service for children. Do doctors make a profit from children? Do dentists make a profit from children? Do speech pathologists who work with children? Of course they do, because they're providing a service to those families. And the people who ultimately are in charge of that have to live too. It's okay for them to make some money. I don't have to feel bad that this is, after 40 years, this is fine. I'm now, working. My husband's retired. It's okay that I can have some nice things because I've worked really hard for it. So I don't worry about that anymore. I used to hate it. I used to think, I could never possibly ask, my families to contribute to a gardening weekend or a working bee because, goodness, they're already paying fees and, But, you kind of have to get over that, because ultimately, and certainly in the early days, if things had crashed, it's my house, my mortgage that's on the line. I carry it.
So if it's okay to have for-profit early childhood centres in Australia, why can't we have for-profit schools?
Well, I don't see any reason why you can't. I think that it's the government that says you can't. Because the government won't give you the same funding. So I believe there already is a Montessori for-profit school started. And, that the difference there is that they won't be getting government funding. So the parents are paying an awful lot more to attend. You can do it. You can register a school privately. You just don't get the funding.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I guess it's about a lot of things, isn't it? You look at most schools, and the problem, not a problem. The school is often reflected by the leader, and leaders change, and so schools change, and there's a whole lot of reasons why it would actually probably in some cases be better if you had that same person with the same vision who's just, looking after their centre. So I don't know why we don't have more centres, or why we can't have more private centres.
Seems like a double standard on the part of the government, which is based on assumptions, or I don't know. But you can see the burgeoning of Montessori in the United States since since it allowed for-profit schools, and also the burgeoning of Montessori in early early childhood in Australia. It's for-profit, and it seems like that would be a way to increase the recognition of Montessori, the availability of Montessori.
Well, look, what if we can get the Montessori staff to do it? And that's, of course, where we're all struggling. And, I can talk about, the long daycare sector, but it's certainly, Montessori often has to represent something different than a primary school setting, in an early childhood setting. And that's another challenge again.
So let's talk about that for a minute, the training bottleneck. Why do you think it's so hard to get trained Montessori staff?
It's hard to get any staff in Australia at the moment. There is a critical shortage, literally, in early childhood. There are centres who are closing the centres. There are centres who are closing rooms because of the requirement for us to have a certain number of staff to ratios to children. And centres just can't find them. And so it's having a really interesting effect from my perspective on what's happening to the people who are applying for the jobs. Because it used to be that if you put an advert in Seek or somewhere for an educator, there was enough applicants that you could do a process of, shortlisting and then interviews and, try them out and talk to them. Now, if you don't bring someone literally within the first 24 hours of them applying on Seek, they've gone somewhere else. And they're not looking for all the things that you can offer them so that they can make a career about it. Most educators are very short-term. Most young people are thinking short-term. So this will be a good job for a while. And not only that then we are competing against a lot of the big companies who are doing incentives to take staff. So, literally there were, I think a sequel might have stopped this. Oh, no, that was for families. But literally there were adverts going up for some of the big companies where, come and we'll give you a pair of diamond earrings. If you can convince a staff member at your previous centre to come to our centre, we'll give you an extra bonus. I mean, just some terrible, terrible stuff going on. And I think, I've gone through so many interviews lately where we've even got to the point of saying, look, fabulous, we'd love you to join us. Thank you. I've written up the contract. And then they ring you and say, oh, don't know. I'm not sure. Look, I don't think it suits my lifestyle. And so, you're left with nobody. It is incredibly hard. So let's assume that, you're lucky if you get enough staff to cover the ratios that you need in your centre. None of those people probably will have any Montessori background when they come to you. So how do you choose them? What I do, I've always said, is I choose on what I hear from that person's heart. It doesn't matter to me terribly whether, I guess we have to have certain qualifications, but it's about the person. It's what I hear them say about children when they talk to me. It's what I read in their application. Many of them, the applications I get these days don't even mention children, don't mention Montessori or spell it incorrectly. Or even the applications come to me that are, headed up, dear somebody, and it's a completely different place. They've just obviously copied the letter and put it out just, everywhere they can. And they have choice, and that's why they do it, because they know they've got choice. They don't have to go, they don't have to put up with anything in the centre anymore that you ask them to do, because they've got behind them, they've got all of the regulatory things that require us to look after their mental well-being and health and safety and all of those things. If you speak to a staff member now in a particular way that might initiate some anxiety, there's all of those things that you have to be very careful about. And people, it disappoints me to know that many of the staff that are coming our way now just don't have that inner drive to better themselves. They really don't care. They're living in the short term. Maybe it's COVID, I don't know, but they're living in the for now. So they're not prepared to do training unless you say, well, yes, I'll pay for it all and I'll pay you to do it and I'll give you 6 hours, a day off to study it. And so, they're not people, the young educators are not really keen to do very much more. They've done their certificate 3, they know everything.
Mm.
Um, so getting staff at all is a challenge. And to then try and convince someone to then go and study further is a really big deal. And, again, we through regulations, we have to have a certain number of early childhood trained teachers.
Mm.
A majority of teachers who are applying now to me are people who've done a master's degree and are from overseas. Now, it's not to say that many of them aren't great, because they are. A lot of them are terrific. But 2 years of a master's degree when they were, doing chemistry before that, it does not make you a particularly well-informed early childhood teacher. And certainly at the moment, the early childhood training is from 0 to 8 years. And so majority of people students that go through early childhood are looking for the money and the 40 weeks a year to go into primary school. And the amount of training they have to do for children from birth to 6 is minimal. They have to spend a couple of weeks in the baby room out of their whole, 4 years of training. So they come out ill-equipped to work in early childhood. And, just having an early childhood teacher does not give you someone who's competent. They're really just starting their journey. So, I mean, I talk generally, I'm not trying to diss people. I'm just telling you some of the issues, the realities of early childhood, and certainly in long day care.
Mm.
And I think, we're struggling. We're really struggling to maintain the Montessori ethos in early childhood in a long day care centre. I think for me, what the biggest difference is that a lot of these children are in our care, some of them 5 days a week. Some of them, we open at 8, but there are centres that open at 6 in the morning and go through till 7 o'clock at night. We're 8 till sort of 6, which is still long enough. And if you think about that, that's more hours in the week that we have those children than their families do. And it is hard work, and it's even harder now because we are not allowed to, obviously, we have to be inclusive. But what we're seeing are more and more children with additional needs. We're seeing more and more children who are really crying out and need, much more help than what we are really trained to give. And yet we can't say no. And we often don't know. Parents don't tell us until they've actually enrolled that these children have issues. And I talk about, I give you an example of a child who's, she's not verbal. She screams most of the day. She needs to be wrapped in a blanket and rolled and, hard massage. I mean, how do you do that when you've got other young children around who are all scared of that noise but we have to. So early childhood is not an easy job. And I think we have to be very real about what we're asking our staff to do, and very real about how authentic we can be with Montessori, because it is incredibly difficult. It is incredibly difficult to follow the Montessori curriculum when you're talking about 2- and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds with special needs. And, my centres all have above staffing ratios. We work with very good ratios where I provide more staff than is needed. But even so, it's hard because those people go to lunch and then there's one less person, for 3 hours or 2 hours. There's, everyone's at lunch and then there's something else happening. And so, it is difficult, and we know it's difficult. As parents, we know it's difficult to spend a whole day with your child, So Yeah, I guess it's, when we talk about training for Montessori, I think we have to be prepared to grab the ones we see with that sparkle who really want to know. And I think we have to look at those people and give them the opportunities to train as much as possible. But we have to accept that there won't be everyone in that classroom who really knows what they're doing. Even as assistants, I think that, we work very differently than the AMI model in my centres. So yeah, so there you go. I'm not trying to. I mean, I sound very negative, and I don't mean to be, but I think the realities of the, particularly the long day sector now, are you're up against what the government are requiring. You're up against what ASEQA are requiring. At the end of the day, there's a whole lot of funding coming at the moment, but that funding, if you read the bottom line of what they ask you if you join up for the funding, there's some pretty strict, pretty amazing things that you have to say you'll do that are certainly not Montessori. So there's challenges all the time.
You brought up some really important issues, Barbara. There's a book that I read last year called "Hold On to Your Kids" by Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, and it was recommended to me by several people, and I kind of resisted it because it looked like it was talking about the importance of attachment with adults, and I felt my gut reaction was, well, that's not going to be very consistent with Montessori because we encourage independence. But I love Gabor Mate's work, so I started reading it, and I found that it was absolutely 100% consistent with Montessori. And what they were saying really was that in order to be independent, human beings first have to have attachment to a significant adult, preferably their parent. And they said that what's been happening since the Second World War with the rise of child culture and child commercialism and working parents, is that attachment that was probably much more secure in Maria Montessori's day has been eroded. And children who, say, go to long daycare starting at 2 years old, like my daughter did, they rather than becoming attached to their parents, they become attached to each other. And because, like you were saying, there just isn't the adult attention in the room for them. So they become attached to each other. And children make terrible parents of one another because even the worst adult carer has some instinctual compulsion to care for children and provide for their safety, whereas children don't. And so children are ruthless to each other as they get older, and particularly, and can be, and what that does is it stops children from being vulnerable with each other because they're always on edge. They're always ready to protect themselves and to be, ridiculed or made fun of. And so they can't be vulnerable. And they talked about the effects of this, even cognitive effects, which I had no idea about. So, for example, the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at one time requires the ability to consider the possibility that you might be wrong, right? So this is what I think, but this could also be true as well. Let me consider both of those, right? And if you can't be vulnerable, you can't do that. And so it stops people from being able to have stereoscopic thinking in that way. And they described so many other effects of this lack of attachment that really took me by surprise. So what they're suggesting, I guess, is that a lot of the problems that you talk about that we're seeing in children, the misbehavior, the developmental problems may be, I'm sure they're due to screens and lack of green space and a lot of other things too, but this attachment, they say, is really the key factor because human beings need that attachment, secure attachment growing up.
Absolutely. And, one of my fears about the long day sector, look, I if I had a magic wand, I wouldn't have a long day sector at all.
Mm.
I would love all parents to be able to stay home and at least in those early years be the main carer of their child. When you're talking about putting a 6-month-old or in some places 2 months old child into childcare, it just breaks my heart. But the thing that I fear the most is that like you're talking about with attachment, that certainly in some of the bigger childcare centres that are being built at the moment with, 150 children in them, and you wonder, how on earth any child ever gets attention, because they're the ones that have the biggest turnover of staff. And they take staff from pretty much anywhere because they're desperate, because they have to have the ratios. So these poor children in a long daycare setting, might start off with, a certain teacher at the helm, or teacher or educator. That educator then gets shifted into another room to help out there, and another relief person might come in here, and then the next shift might start, and then there's another. So by the time they get to the end of the day, these children have had a turnover of people in that room caring for them many times, and often people they don't even know, who've been, plucked from anywhere because we need the numbers. So this sense of safety, the sense of attachment, the sense of someone actually liking you and knowing your name, it is getting lost. And as you have kind of talked about there, that creates, for some, in many situations, a competitive environment where children are competing to be heard and seen. And so, they're competing with each other, and it gets back to the louder one gets the attention, and the strongest one gets the equipment. And so it is doing the opposite of what we believe as Montessori educators is the right thing for children to grow up with. It's a competitive environment, and it's very frightening. I'm really concerned about this generation of childcare children, who, particularly these children who've, since COVID, who already are displaying some quite sad cognitive issues. I guess, I really worry about who they will be and become as teenagers and young people. Because they're not.
I want to clarify that Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, they're not suggesting that we should go back to the good old days, where the woman stayed home, cared for the children. Those weren't necessarily at all the good old days. And they're saying that, we can have an advanced industrial society where both parents are working, but we have to prioritize attachment. And there are ways of doing that in long daycare, where the child is not sacrificed. That attachment is not sacrificed. If you could give some advice to government ministers, what would your suggestions be about ways that we could turn this around and fix these problems that you allude to?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really big question because first and foremost, I think most of people in government and most of the rules and regulations that are written by government are written by academics, people who haven't walked the talk. And it's pretty obvious when you read a lot of the stuff that's coming our way, particularly lately in all the changes that are happening, that there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding about what children need and who they are. In South Australia, probably Australia-wide now, there's going to be a change, for instance, that they're going to have universal access for 3-year-olds into early learning centres. And so that means funding effectively coming to enable children to do that, to access care. I guess, again, all of those things I agree with, to some respect, as long as those children are getting, as you said, Mark, it's not just about pushing children into a childcare centre, it's about giving them some quality and giving them some time. Children learn when they feel safe. Children learn when they feel heard and seen. And, that Montessori in a smaller context, I think, can do that. But in the big long daycare centres, I wish the government wouldn't allow huge centres to be here. I wish we could say that there's a certain number beyond which it becomes, an orphanage. and not actually a childcare centre.
Mm.
I wish the difference is, that decisions in these big centres, did have a bit more personal input, that they're not just coming from a company in Queensland that's filtering down all the policies to the people in Adelaide, and they have to requisition a roll of toilet paper sort of from Queensland before they can actually go get what they need for the children. I guess I don't know. I suppose I just want to stand up and shout, to the people in government, just, do you know what a 2-year-old is? Do you know what a 3-year-old needs? Have you ever looked at these little babies and, wondered what it is that you're saying when you tell us this is the rules around the care for these children? Because, even in the world of the real world of parenting, we are, if a parent has triplets, the whole of community comes in here, and says, oh my goodness, you have 3 babies to look after, my goodness, and society helps and people think it's amazing. In childcare, it's okay for you to look after, to have a person who's potentially untrained or very early trained, who might be 17, looking after 3 or 4 babies.
Mm.
It's frightening. It's really frightening on what quality and what that child is learning in that early stage. So what would I say? I keep banging the fists. I keep going to meetings. I keep sitting in government forums and just asking them to think about the children. That I'm really concerned that a lot of decisions are about pushing women back to work. And I understand that to some degree, but I wish that wasn't how what they thought about children. I wish when a child is born that the first thing that the parents are thinking is, well, which childcare centre do I put my name down on? I wish that wasn't the way that parents started their lifetimes, thinking that they can't take this, they can't have less in their home or less televisions, or because all of the younger people these days also want everything to start their lives. In many cases, I realize there's always exceptions, but I recently had a child who was really causing some anxiety to the class and to the children, and the staff around him for some incredible behaviours. And his mum, just when we suggested that he might, cut from 5 days to 4 days so he could spend some time with her, she was kind of gobsmacked because she didn't think she was capable. And that's really sad, isn't it? That a parent starts their parenting life thinking that people in childcare are better than they are. Nobody's better than a parent, but we have information, we have background, we understand child development, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're better with that child at giving them the love that they need.
Yeah. Now, of course, you've been a pioneer in one of the solutions to this problem, which of course is to combine the 2 ends of the lifespan. Can you talk a bit about that intergenerational project venture that you started?
So I guess, this is what keeps me being part of the living legend, that I'm still living, still doing, still learning, still enjoying, what I'm doing. I guess inspired by the journey that my parents took. My mum had Alzheimer's, and so we were very close to seeing the reality of aging, as well as the nursing care, which is another thing altogether. But I guess, Jessica, my daughter, and I felt very strongly that what was happening to people who were growing older was that they're becoming a silent minority, and they're probably even a silent majority, but people just didn't. You start to lose who you are as you get older. I don't know if you get it, Matt, but I do. I certainly, I go into a shop now and it's like you don't exist until you go, excuse me, I'm here. But in lots of ways, the rights and the dignity of older people has been lost. And certainly when people go into care, it's shocking in some instances to me, how people are treated. And so Jess and I really felt, particularly based on what we'd seen ourselves with my parents, and particularly my dad, when he used to come into the preschools and work with the children. He was a tailor, and so he used to come and do sewing with the children and, show them his machine and do things with them. And I guess we felt that there had to be something much better in the way that we prepared our older citizens, by giving community, making community. And we've lost a lot of community. We've lost neighbours even, who have high fences now. We don't often even know the people in our street. And so we were very keen to find out more about how we could put the younger generation with an older generation and form connections that could give good outcomes for both the children and the older people. And I suppose we were really lucky. Jess and I both did a bit of study about that, but we were very lucky to have an opportunity to work, again, a serendipitous situation that came my way, but I happened to have a coffee with the CEO of an aged care provider in Adelaide, called ECH. And I just outlined my vision of perhaps, one day being able to put people together in this way. And he said, well, as it turns out, we're building a new community out in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. And we'd love to have that be part of our model. So Jess and I were very lucky because right from the beginning of working with the architects who were designing the whole of this new beautiful complex that they have out there, we were able to have the vision of how would we put the community of people who are retired, who are living there. It's not a nursing care situation. This is for retired people who buy their apartments, and it's this beautiful multi-story apartment complex. How do we make that vision of being important as part of the community? We didn't want to just be lopped on the edge of a community of people. We wanted to be part of it. And so we were very lucky because they built this beautiful environment for us, where our childcare centre is effectively front and centre of the whole of the complex, and people live around us, opposite us, up above us in apartments. And the people, the beautiful grandfriends, we call them, come down when they want to. Sometimes we organise something that's specific, but often they just drop in because we're part of their community. And so we have this beautiful situation where we're touching the lives of both the young children and the older people by putting them together, and they're learning from each other. And the beautiful moments that are happening are incredible. It's just it's wonderful because we're finding situations where the children are actually saving so many of the people who are entering into retirement and perhaps had lost who they are or what they are, or were away from their own grandchildren. They've been able to come in and make friends with our children, and work with them side by side. There are people in the village who are, come and fix all our equipment for us. If something breaks, we ring a couple of the blokes and they'll come down. They have a workshop downstairs and the children go down with them and they'll teach the children how to fix the things that are broken. It's just beautiful. A group of ladies who love sewing, and so they've been teaching the children knitting and sewing, and someone else who sings and plays the piano, and just all these beautiful life skills of the grandfriends who come together with the children. And so there's this lovely sense of each working together and making a community, and that's what I think we're losing generally in our lives. That I'd love to see that happen more.
Have you noticed how long has it been operating now?
Just over 2 years now.
It may be not long enough to know, but have you noticed a difference in the disposition of children at that centre versus children at centres that don't have grandfriends?
Yes, I think you would find that there is a difference. I think we've noticed children's sense of care has perhaps, for instance, we have some people who are not as mobile, who are either with walking frames or, in a wheelchair. And we have children who'll go and help them, who want to assist them and guide them, and they're not seeing them as being different or disabled. They're seeing them as being my grandfriend who just needs a bit of help to come in. So the compassionate part of that, the sense of looking for the togetherness, I think, yes, definitely. The opportunity to work with a grandfriend has just been wonderful. The children look forward to when a grandfriend comes in. They look forward to the things that they're going to do together. They look forward to being down in the gardens with them. They know where they live. They look out of the windows and they know which apartment buildings, apartment balconies people are on. And so, they'll call out to their friends and, we'll see you down in the garden. And everyone, it's just beautiful. It is really beautiful. So yes, I think there is something different about a program. We have a lot of people who are enrolling specifically because of that, the families, and many of those families don't have the grandparents here. They have grandparents that are overseas and their children don't get to see their grandparents very much. So it's filling a void in that way too, which is just beautiful. Mm.
Now, you're sweating it out in Sydney at the moment because you were up here to be honored on Saturday as the second living legend, our Montessori Australia Living Legend for 2025 at the recognition award ceremony on Saturday night. What are your thoughts about that? How has that process been for you? I know there are some in the Montessori community who would argue that we shouldn't really do this in Montessori because we don't prioritize external rewards. We should all just really do it, the internal satisfaction of doing what we do. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'll put my hand up and say that, originally I probably had some thoughts along the same lines. I guess because we're so, we know that the work we do is not for accolades. It's in your heart. It's who you are. It's what you see and your desire to make the world a better place through children. I think, certainly initially it would have bothered me to think that there was going to be a way, I guess, of selecting people who, there are so many silent people who are silent who do beautiful work that may never get recognised. And I guess that sat uncomfortably for me for a while. But the nomination this year, the most important part for me was that it made me actually stop and reflect. Our lives are very busy and we do our work every day, we keep going, and sometimes it's very hard to stop and celebrate because you just on to the next issue or solving the next problem or going somewhere differently. And so this nomination in itself, let alone the award, I guess that the actual nomination allowed me to reflect back on my life. And it's over half of my life that I've been journeying with Montessori in my heart. And that was wonderful because it allowed me to also remember the people I've come across in that time, the wonderful parts of learning new things, the amazing staff that I've had, the educators, the families, the children. I have children who have, I've got children of children coming to my centres. I used to once get, how children grab hold of your legs, and think you're the mum occasionally without looking up. Definitely now I'm the grandma. I'm not not the mother. So, it makes me feel incredibly proud, but, quite old to think that, I've got a child of a child and several now. But those things have made the reward that I need. I don't need an external reward, but I think I probably needed a point of saying, just stop and reflect, and it's okay to feel good about that. It's okay to let someone else acknowledge that as well. And so receiving that award for me is that's the best part of it, that it's not about am I better than anybody else. That's not true. There's some amazing people doing some amazing work in Montessori. So it's not about being the best. I don't want to carry something as the best. What I want to be able to do with this award is say, it was really lovely that other people have seen that journey, and it was really lovely that someone has taken the time to give me an opportunity to thank the people who've been part of my journey, and thank them publicly, which I could do. So that's what it's going to be from there, apart from the fact that I'm getting teased every day now, from my family about, living legend, but I'm very thrilled to carry that and to be able to say, yeah, I've worked hard. I don't feel like I think I've always kept what's in my heart as the primary thing for everything that I've done. And I'm really happy that I'm at this stage of my life where I'm still inspired, with the intergenerational work. Jessica and I are doing a lot of consulting now with councils and libraries and other places that are wanting to set up intergenerational programs. So it's spreading. It's something new, and to be able to raise the profile of what Montessori is in a whole new sphere is amazing. So I'm not over yet. I'm still going and still really happy that I can find a new avenue for Montessori to sit.
I know there were some other questions that people had for you. Would you like to ask a question or make a comment, anybody?
I was just going to add that at the dinner with the awards, and much like you, Barbara, I was initially someone who questioned it, and we thrashed out the whole idea. But there were young people at our table who were so excited, and who said, I think they were just in awe of what was happening in the room and hearing the stories about what was happening. And one said, I want to be there. And I thought it's not a competitive thing. It's getting a little bit of inspiration and to know what's happening as well and what people have committed.
Yes. Okay.
So that was just an observation I sort of didn't expect, but yeah, it was lovely. It's lovely. Yeah.
Well, for me personally too, I mean, I have a son who lives in Sydney and don't see him often, but it was wonderful to have my family there. They made an effort, and my brother came from Adelaide and surprised me, and it was just lovely that, irrespective of the outcome, that didn't matter. The final part didn't matter. What the nomination in itself was enough to bring my family together who've travelled with me, and to be able to say, thank you everybody, for being part of that. It was just lovely. That was really special. I saw Susan's hand up early, but she's gone, I think.
I'm here.
She's there.
Oh, yes. Hi,
Susan. I was going to say that sometimes I'm in long daycare and sometimes I feel like it's éducateurs sans frontières.
Yeah.
Like we're actually doing that. I too didn't know what a long daycare centre was when I came here, but somebody's got to be doing that. Although we would probably in a better world, we'd think, oh yes, we would like to have a shorter day or whatever. But because somebody is doing those long hours, we're there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to congratulate yourself for that. You are doing that. And also, I wanted to ask you, in that intergenerational place that you have, with the that they built it, do you own that centre?
The actual physical centre?
Yeah, do you own the business there?
Oh yeah, yeah. So basically, yes. So we just effectively rent the space as you would in any other or many of the other places that we have.
Okay.
But yeah, we are Jessica and I are partners in owning that business, if you like, as an early childhood place. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what I ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I hear you, Susan, and one of the reasons for many years I resisted actually looking after children under the age of 2, because again, as a parent, it used to hurt me to see some of the care that I did see around the place for children under 2. And it was only really, again, you have to balance what you know in society and what society needs. And yeah, there are parents who really need that care. And so as you're saying, what I kind of decided was, well, then if they're going to need it, I'd rather it was good. let me try and provide some good care. And Jess and I both went to America and studied the Pickler training there as well, to try and correspond, to try and give us again the labeling of how do we switch what I'd seen in care for children under 2, especially babies, where they're all lined up and a spoon is thrown into everybody's mouth along the production line. And so, it wasn't till I could actually get it into my head how I wanted to treat those babies that I was able to do it. And that's what we do, or what we say we do differently, is that everything we do with those babies is done with them, not to them. And that's a big difference. And so, yeah, I think in long daycare, Mark, in general, there's a lot of things you have to compromise in the way that I guess the curriculum of Montessori is written. But I think what is the most important thing in long day care, in any care, is the philosophy behind Montessori, that, what do you believe is the right of this child? What do you believe in this child? What can you give this child? How can you make sure that, if the child is struggling, that you're there for them, that you don't just label them with a title of something wrong with them. I read again a quote today, I think, if a child isn't learning, change. It's not the child. Change what you're doing, change the environment, not the child. And so I think with the principles behind Montessori, you can still have a good Montessori long daycare centre. You might not have exactly, the right lesson of all the things that are out in the equipment, but it is you can have the principles behind it, and that's what I care about the most.
Barbara, you've done so much in your life for Montessori, to get Montessori to more families. Have you figured out the work-life balance question?
Oh, look, I grew a daughter to help me. Is that a good answer? I think I'm doing okay, Mark. I think, I'm really lucky because I love what I do. And anybody who works in something that they're passionate about, it's a very different type of work, isn't it? I'm lucky because I do have choices, and more so of these latter years, because seriously, Jessica has been able to take over a lot of things for me, and has protected me a little bit more, in my day-to-day I guess, availability to people. When you have 100 staff, it's a lot, and it's a lot of taking care of other people, and we have to be really careful that you don't empty the cup without refilling. And so, but I think I do that pretty well. My husband's retired now, and my office at the moment is at home. The hardest part I've got is that he kind of forgets that I'm working. Now that he's retired. And so when he's very sweetly comes up and says, "Oh, let's go out to lunch," and you go, okay, I'll just finish this email. But then I try and go, I try and go now, and give myself shorter working days, and just, I if I didn't have that inspiration still there, it would be harder, because I'm slower, I'm older, and I can't do the things as quickly as, these young women do now, and young folks. But I just am still inspired. I still love it. I still walk into a centre and look at the children and look at what's happening, and it just fills my heart with joy. So, yeah.
Well, you are an inspiration to so many around you. So congratulations on being the living legend for this coming year. And thank you again for this. Was such an interesting conversation. I always enjoy talking with you, Barbara.
Thank you.
We could go on for hours, I'm sure.
Actually, one day I'd like to sit in a room with you, Mark, and we'll have a really long, let's have a couple of drinks and and a long conversation. It could be coffee, I don't care. But yeah, I'd love to have a longer conversation. It'd be a lovely thing to do with, all of you who are listening. I know most of you really well, and I know that we actually don't get a chance much to actually sit and just, talk about things, really, just other than what's going on and what we have to fix. So let's just have a talk one day about each other. It'd be lovely. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for
Thanks,
coming to
Barbara.
Montessori Lives. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. See ya.